everyone. I hope you had a wonderful holiday weekend. There was some great hockey this past weekend. There were some 8-goal games. There were some great overtimes. It was a lot of fun to watch hockey this weekend. But there was a lot that happened in the league today, which I want to cover. First off, Montreal put defenseman Karl Alzner on waivers. This was to make room for defenseman Shea Weber's long-awaited return. Shea Weber's been out since December. But the Karl Alzner thing's a little interesting because he signed that big contract just last year, after being with the Washington Capitals for his whole career, and they decided to put him on waivers. Now, he hasn't been playing that great, but he's not really a scoring defenseman. But Claude Julien was quoted as saying, and this is not an exact quote, but he wants to evaluate the younger guys, and he felt that putting Alzner on waivers was the lowest risk out of them all. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. But then, I think, well, why would you pay a guy all this money to just be put on waivers? But that's besides the point. But I think that's a nice fresh perspective, so we'll see how that plays out for Montreal. Alzner is expected to report to Laval, which is Montreal's AHL team. Today, Chicago and Arizona made a trade. They've been frequent trade partners in the past. They traded forwards Brendan Perlini and Dylan Strome for Nick Schmaltz. I can't even think right now. All are former first-round picks. Dylan Strome in particular probably stands out. One, because his brother was recently traded, and two, because he was in the famous McDavid Eichel draft in 2015, while the other two players were in the 2014 draft. So these are definitely players who need changes of scenery. These are teams who are struggling for different reasons. Arizona is interesting because you feel like they've been in a forever rebuild, whereas Chicago is trying to finally rebuild after all those Stanley Cup years. So we'll see how it plays out for each of those teams. But I think any young player's in good hands with Rick Tocchet, to be honest. And, Chicago, as much as they've struggled over the past couple years, it's still Chicago at the end of the day. Why would you not want to play for the Blackhawks? So good for them. But this is my favorite story of the day. The Philadelphia Flyers fired general manager Ron Hextall. And you're thinking, I think my favorite part about this is really the Twitter reactions, to be honest. I happen to be friends personally with a lot of Flyers fans. I have connections to that area, and it's just been really funny. And I share the same sentiment. Why did they not fire Dave Hextall? Well, the theory is that Paul Holmgren, who was the president of the Flyers, and he was once the general manager of the Flyers, he fired Hextall because Hextall would not fire Dave Hextall. But the actual press release for the Hextall firing said, in a very blunt Philadelphia-style way, that they were not seeing eye to eye on the direction of the team. Hextall had said in the past that he's a very patient guy, which is funny because Hextall was not really patient as a player, but as a general manager, he's been very patient, and he's been a proponent of a true rebuild. And even if you look at the Flyers, one thing that was pointed out was they're not fighting as much. They're not, they're not the Flyers, they're not the Broad Street Bullies anymore. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Fighting as a whole has gone down in the league. And I think Hextall actually recognizes that the Flyers need to adapt to the rest of the league. Because for so long the Flyers would play their own brand of hockey, which would work to an extent. But outside of their 2 cups in the 70s, they don't really have anything to show for it. They have made a couple of, finals appearances in the past decade or so, but they don't really have anything to show for it. And in a loaded Metro division where they're in 7th place, they've they've got to decide which direction they're going in. And Paul Holmgren has obviously said that he doesn't like the way, Hextall is running the team, so he's of course let him go. Holmgren has said that the search for the general manager is underway already, and there have been some contenders out for it. But if I'm Ron Hextall, I'm not too upset, to be honest, because he's going to get a job somewhere else. If he wants to get a job, he will. I actually think he was really smart with the way he's handled everything. And just keep in mind, he was the GM for the past 4+ years. And, the Flyers have definitely had some ups and you can kind of tell. I'm sorry, I'm sidetracking here. You can just kind of tell that Hextall and Holmgren were not seeing eye to eye. And the whole dynamic's just really interesting because a lot of team presidents tend to be hands off. But then you have someone like Holmgren, especially, since Holmgren was the general manager of the Flyers, then he hands the reins off to someone else. It's kind of concerning, the miscommunication there. So they're going to have to find someone who can handle Holmgren still kind of being in there, if you will. But I definitely think Hextall will find another team. You can't blame these goaltending issues on Hextall per se. I mean, the Flyers just have horrible luck with their goaltenders. And it's almost, if you're not a Flyers fan, it's very comical. If you are a Flyers fan, it might be comical in some ways, and it's also frustrating in other ways, because, when are you going to win, with a goalie? And on top of it, they drafted Carter Hart. Carter Hart is struggling in the minors. And just their top guys in general are not playing well. They're not playing as a cohesive unit. So personally, I fully expect for head coach Dave Hextall to be given the axe probably by the end of the year would be my guess. I'm sure they'll find a general manager by the end of the year. If not, Paul Holmgren will fire Hextall himself. I really wouldn't put it past him, to be honest. But those are my thoughts for the day. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk later.